Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Conspiracy Crunch. My name's Aaron Chandler. You'll notice that there is another significant absence on the show today, so I'm just going to try and sort my mic volume out in the background. There we go. That's about right there, I think. Just shuffle my chair a bit. Welcome to the show. This week's a bit different. Also, before I get going, apologies for the late start. Normally on at 3 p.m. We started a few minutes late today because we couldn't find the studio key. But we're trying to get it sorted at the moment. Probably will still finish at 4 o'clock, even though this is quite a long episode. But as you can already tell, it's just me today, so we'll probably get through it a little quicker, as there'll be a little less sort of back and forth conversation between presenters like me and Abby would normally have. Abby's otherwise occupied this week, which is why she can't make it, but they will be back for next week's show, hopefully. So tune in then if you came to see Abby. But if you did, just stay anyway because, please stay. Today's episode is about... it's a bit different as an episode, actually. We've never really done anything like this before, which is exciting. I like doing stuff that's different. This is quite a hotly contested subject in the area of pro wrestling. Anyone that knows me personally will know I'm a huge professional wrestling fan, and this is one that really, really interests me as a conspiracy theory. This is the conspiracy theory of, was Chris Benoit framed, is the thing here. Was Chris Benoit innocent? We'll go into a bit more detail in a sec, but before we go, I like to say this does cover some quite sensitive subjects today. If you are a listener of a sensitive or nervous disposition, then perhaps this week's episode isn't for you. I hate turning listeners away, but I just want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into when you listen today. We've had some quite hard-hitting episodes already this season with the Halloween special was quite a hard-hitting one too. But today is also no exception. So today is Chris Benoit conspiracy, and we will get off into that in just a sec. But just to give you an idea of how hotly contested this subject is, I posted the fact that I was doing the show today on a wrestling forum online, and I'll share with you some of the comments. The top comment is just the word scumbag in capital letters. The next comment down was, he was an awesome wrestler. And then it was, stop this, amazing wrestler, but he did some awful things, rot in hell, he deserves 0 accolades. Benoit is innocent is another one, rot in hell. And then, as you can see, there is a real big spectrum of opinions on Chris Benoit in the wrestling community, and beyond as well. I mean, this is without question the biggest tragedy in wrestling history. We're going to talk about it today. Like I said, viewer discretion is advised, or listener discretion, I suppose. Anyway, here we go. The Conspiracy Crunch, Season 2, pardon me, getting way ahead of myself there. Season 2, Episode 4, was Chris Benoit framed? Chris Benoit was a Canadian-born professional wrestler who competed in promotions across the world, but was most well known for his time in the World Wrestling Federation, later known as WWE. Benoit debuted for WWF in 2000 alongside well-known wrestlers like Perry Saturn and Chavo Guerrero Jr. Benoit had a decorated career in WWF, or as it was later known, WWE, and won a magnitude of championships. He won the Intercontinental Championship 4 times. He was also a 4-time tag team champion with names such as Edge, Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle. He won the 2004 Royal Rumble. He was a 3-time United States champion and a 1-time World Heavyweight champion. Chris Benoit was in the fast lane to be considered one of the best wrestlers ever. And during his career, he was seen as one of the best technical wrestlers the sport had ever seen at the time. However, the absolute unthinkable happened in 2007. At the age of 40, Chris Benoit was found dead at his home in Georgia alongside his wife Nancy Benoit and their son Daniel Benoit. Initially, there was heartbreak amongst the wrestling community, but this emotion changed to rage and confusion once the cause of death was announced to the public. According to official police reports, Benoit had drugged and killed his wife and son before taking his own life in a double murder-suicide. This is still considered to be the biggest tragedy in wrestling history, and Chris Benoit's legacy has been almost entirely erased from WWE. I say almost, it has been entirely erased. There is currently a ban in WWE from all staff members and wrestlers from even saying Benoit's name, let alone referencing him. Still to this day, here we go. Still to this day, wrestlers, commentators and staff are banned from even referencing him, but conspiracy theories surrounding Benoit's death have gradually gained traction since 2007, and a number of wrestling conspiracists believe Chris Benoit may have actually been framed. So here's the big questions for today. What was the impact of Benoit's death on wrestling? Of course, a big aftermath from this, as we'll come to see. What evidence is there to suggest that Benoit was framed? All conspiracy theories do need evidence, no matter how long-winded and abstract they are. There's still normally at least strands of so-called evidence to support them. Who could have framed him? This is quite a short list, but it's still one we've got to look at, because obviously you can't say he was framed without saying who framed him. And what would happen if it was proved that Benoit was framed? Of course, it'd have massive, massive repercussions on not just professional wrestling, but like the justice system in America as a whole, as to how we could have gone 13 years assuming this man was guilty when he was in fact framed. It would be a massive revelation. But before we get onto that, let's look at the aftermath of what happened. Benoit's death, of course, shocked the world. He was still a regular main event competitor at WWE at the time of his death, even though he was wrestling for ECW at the time, which was a WWE offshoot brand at the time of Benoit's death. In fact, he was scheduled to compete for the ECW World Championship the weekend that he died. This shows you how predominant of a figure he was at the period. WWE staff were alerted to an issue concerning Benoit when he didn't arrive for the show, which prompted WWE owner Vince McMahon to send a WWE representative to his house to see if everything was okay, which obviously it wasn't. A tribute was paid to Chris Benoit at the beginning of the Monday Night Raw the day after his death was confirmed, but before the cause of death had been confirmed. Once the cause of death was confirmed the following day, the Tuesday night taping of ECW opened with Vince McMahon on commentary, essentially letting people know that Chris Benoit would never be mentioned on any WWE product ever again. Mr. McMahon's statement, it's on YouTube, it's a really haunting watch. Sort of such it sort of defies explanation of how daunting of a thing this must have been for him. But this is the quote. Last night on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognising the career of Chris Benoit. However, some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Chris Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you. That was an exact quote. That was the opening segment on ECW on the 26th of June 2007, and Chris Benoit's name has never been mentioned in WWE again. Benoit's death also sparked debates about whether WWE was following proper precautions to protect its talent, both mentally and physically. The autopsy conducted on Chris Benoit by the chief neurological surgeon of West Virginia University concluded that Benoit was suffering from multiple untreated concussions at the time of his death. The official report stated that, and I quote, Benoit's brain was so severely damaged it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Chris Benoit was a 40-year-old athlete in peak physical condition, by the way. It was also revealed in a toxicology report from July 2007 that Benoit and several other wrestlers were using steroids, which they obtained from outside of WWE, which went against the WWE wellness policy. However, none of them had actually been tested before Benoit's death, so WWE had no clue. Benoit's death prompted strict testing of athletes for use of drugs, as well as regular neurological tests to make sure talent was not suffering from untreated concussions. Evidence of that being in place came from WWE female wrestler Paige having to retire young because WWE staff recognised an issue. Corey Graves became a commentator after they recognised that he had an untreated concussion and they wouldn't let him compete. And Daniel Bryan also went 2 years without competing because of WWE's new wellness policy that has come in place since 2007, which prevents wrestlers from competing with head trauma or damage in any way or form. So yeah, let's look at the evidence to suggest Benoit was framed now after that little segue. The toxicology report is the first thing on the list. In the toxicology report from Benoit's autopsy, it was revealed that he, his wife and son had all been administered a variety of drugs before their death. Nancy Benoit, who is Chris's wife obviously, was found to have Xanax in her system alongside hydrocodone and hydromorphone, 2 high-strength prescribed painkillers. However, these are found to be of therapeutic levels rather than toxic or fatal levels. Interestingly, Benoit was also found to have Xanax and a hydrocodone in his system. According to medical reports and conspiracy theorists, the muscle relaxation effects of these drugs would mean Benoit would suffer massively from muscle fatigue symptoms. Because of this, he could not have the strength to kill his wife or himself, even if Nancy was also under the influence of Xanax. The level of adrenaline found in Chris Benoit's bloodstream at the time of his death also proves that he was not experiencing so-called roid rage induced by his use of steroids. And here's another interesting one that is going to be quite a consistent theme throughout the show today. This is the edits to Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page. Sourcing Wikipedia isn't usually a good idea and generally gets you nothing but ridicule when you use Wikipedia as a reference for anything at all ever, as I'm sure you know. But in this instant, it played an eerie role in Benoit's murder investigation. According to the edit history of Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page, the death of his wife was not only predicted but confirmed 13 hours before the police had even arrived at his house. The edits to Benoit's page were made shortly after midnight on Monday 25th of June 2007 and said the following. I quote, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for ECW Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. The thing is, these edits were added at 12:01 AM. Nancy's death was not officially confirmed by police until 2:30 PM later that day. As you probably know, Wikipedia can be edited by absolutely anyone with the internet access, and the majority of contributions to the website are done so anonymously. This edit was taken down by an editor within an hour of it being posted due to lack of citation. Anyone can add information to a Wikipedia page, but editors hold the power to remove updates if there is no verification of the facts added to the pages. Wikipedia editors actually contacted the local police force in Fayetteville, Georgia around 11 AM to try and get confirmation of this case. Mentioning the edits on their page, Lieutenant Tommy Pope was... So basically, the staff of Wikipedia, the editors who were in charge of Chris Benoit's page, saw that edit and it kind of spooked them a bit, so they got in charge with police after Benoit didn't show up, and that in turn helped to spark the search and investigation of his house. Lieutenant Tommy Pope was head of Benoit investigation, and when talking about the Wikipedia post, he said the following, and I quote, "It is unbelievable how much of a hindrance this has put on our investigation. We've got to put a lot of effort and time into working to prove or disprove that someone put a hoax situation or that someone was conceiving the death from out of state." Interestingly, police attempted to track the IP address of the computer that uploaded the edits to the Wikipedia article and managed to trace it to Stamford, Connecticut. You're probably wondering why this is significant, but here's the thing. Stamford, Connecticut is the home of WWE's headquarters building, which is an extreme coincidence if you've ever seen one. However, on Friday 29th of June 2007, on Friday 29th of June 2007, the alleged culprit of the edit came forward via Wikipedia saying that the edit was nothing more than a terrible coincidence. This was their exact statement. Last weekend, I heard about Chris Benoit not showing at Vengeance because of a family emergency, and I had heard rumours about why that was. I was reading rumours and speculation about this online, and one of them included that his wife may have passed away. I did the wrong thing by posting it on Wikipedia despite there being no evidence. I posted by speculation about the situation at the time, and I'm deeply sorry about this. And I was just as shocked as everyone else when I heard that this is actually what happened in real life. It was one of those things that just turned into a huge coincidence. Shortly after, the person behind the post was revealed to be 19-year-old from Stamford, Connecticut named Matthew Greenberg. ABC News later reported that the IP address used by Greenberg had been linked to other cases of false information and speculation being uploaded to Wikipedia pages. One of the most notable edits actually led to the IP address being flagged for vandalism by the Wikipedia editors, included a racist update on the Wikipedia page for NBA star Ron Artest. The police concluded that Benoit wiki update was in fact a coincidence and Greenberg faced no official charges. Although I'm sure he was probably incredibly rattled by that, and I doubt he ever did anything like that ever again. There was also a second edit to the Chris Benoit Wikipedia page before the deaths had been confirmed. But this IP address was traced to an internet service provider in Australia. Already doubts are being cast here as how could someone that far away know about it before local police? It just doesn't make sense, does it? However, this was the furthest the investigations went into the second IP address, and the person behind the post has never been identified. But IP address software can be used to make it look like your post came from somewhere else, and this software is readily available today as it was in 2007. So there is no certainty that the post actually came from Australia. They might have just been using an IP masking device, which are, like I said, readily available. You can get apps and programs that change the location of your IP address now. I know a lot of YouTubers use it when they're trying to get into games around the world and do different stuff. Yeah, it's easy to do. It's very accessible. Another online exchange also cast doubt on the official police report, but this one comes directly from the chat forums on the WWE website. The following exchange was clocked on Sunday 24th of June 2007. Username Jupiter said, Benoit's wife is dead. And then username Gob the Illusionist, yeah, you're already struggling with this one. Chris Benoit is a murderer is what he responded. Gob the Illusionist is found to be a fan named Sheldon Chandler from Orlando who apparently was, and I quote, just joking around. Bit of a dark joke to make, don't you think, really? Especially considering the circumstances that came afterwards. I mean, according to his report, he didn't know that that was the way it was going to happen, but still, it's not really excusable, that is it? Investigative journalist Irvin Muchnick said the local police department did a, and I quote, bare-boned investigation into Matthew Greenberg's Wikipedia post and seemed almost completely unbothered by the Australian edit, which leads us on to our next point, the Chavo Guerrero phone calls. This is a really big part of this, actually. When I initially started this research, I didn't think this was that big of a deal, but now that I've actually researched into it, you can acknowledge the fact that this is a really huge part of it. Chavo Guerrero and Chris Benoit were close friends, so it's no surprise to learn that they regularly texted each other. But it turns out Benoit was still texting Chavo on the day that he and his family died. In the early morning hours of Sunday 24th of June 2007, Benoit sent an odd text to both Chavo Guerrero and WWE referee Scott Armstrong, containing his home address in Fayetteville, Georgia. Chavo and Armstrong did not make WWE officials aware of the text messages until Monday afternoon once Benoit had been confirmed dead. In his book titled Chris and Nancy, Irvin Muchnick questions whether WWE officials actually became aware of the text messages Benoit sent. Muchnick speculates whether WWE sent any representatives to the house before the bodies were officially discovered in his book. If they did, it would make much different reading WWE's understanding of the Benoit death. Here we find ourselves back with Matthew Greenberg. Even though Greenberg posted several offensive messages on different Wikipedia pages to WWE stars and other athletes, he regularly defended Chavo's Wikipedia and removed false or negative entries. It's a big jump, but some conspiracy theorists see this as a link between Chavo and Greenberg, which allowed Chavo to tip off Greenberg about the texts. Muchnick's investigation presses even further when he says the following. I couldn't accept the face value of the Fayetteville County report's bland assurance. Stanford forwarded a bland assurance that Matthew Greenberg was, and I quote, harmless. This conclusory statement seemed especially inadequate when it became apparent that language in a supplement report claiming that a copy of Stanford PD of Greenberg was included in the case was at best misleading. When pressed, Detective Ethan Harper of Stanford PD conceded that he wrote the report on Matthew Greenberg without actually watching the videotape interrogation. So to summarise that, they basically did a video interrogation with Greenberg, and the detective that wrote the report on Greenberg never actually watched the tape of the interview. He just assumed it was pointless and wrote him off as innocent, which is so lazy. You can't believe that in a case as severe as this, they just have such a lackluster approach. It is really... I'm lost for words on that one, honestly. But yeah, it is a big jump to say that Greenberg had a connection with Chavo. I mean, why would Chavo Guerrero care about a 19-year-old wrestling fan living in the same area as WWE's headquarters? I mean, there is a lot of coincidences there, like he's a big fan of Chavo. Chavo would be in the area a lot. It is possible that they met, but I highly doubt that they had such a tight-knit relationship that Chavo was willing to share information like that with him via text. By the way, I will have a little break halfway through, as it's just me. This is a very speech-heavy show. I'll have a break halfway through just so I can sort of regather myself, regroup, and then I'll be back for part 2 after just this little bit here. So, Muchnick asked for a copy of the full videotape, but the copy he received was cut after just 3 minutes. But yeah, like I said just now, why would Chavo care about Matthew Greenberg enough to give him details about Benoit's death? Benoit was one of Chavo's best friends. Greenberg was just a fan. Surely Chavo needed a bigger link than this to leak information about his friend's death. But yeah, I'll leave you a moment to contemplate on the information that has been covered so far, and I'll be back in about 2 minutes for part 2. Alright, okay, and we're back. I hope you're still with us. Yeah, I just needed a little break there because, like I said, doing the whole show by myself today, it can be quite daunting just talking for an hour straight. So needed a little bit of a break there to sort of regather myself. As I'm sure you noticed, I was mincing my words a little bit towards the end there. That's because it's sort of there's a lot of words in front of me on this document, and it's yeah, like I said, it can get quite daunting. So I just need a little break to sort of refresh my mind. Yeah, part 2. Before we get into part 2, I want to do a few social media shout outs to people that are listening. So hello Michael, thanks for tuning in. Andrew, thanks for tuning in as well. Yeah, we've got quite a few listeners today. It's interesting that these little niche subjects seem to do better than the general conspiracies in terms of viewership. But yeah, you just got to find that little niche audience to tap into. So let's have a look. What's next? Next is who could have framed Chris Benoit. Like I said at the top of the show, we have to consider this. Of course, people mentioned in this, it is by no way meant as a way of calling them out or an accusation, as you'll come to see in the conclusion and what is mentioned in this. But yeah, you'll see as we get to it. So yeah, we have to mention who could have potentially framed Chris Benoit, because otherwise what's the point of saying he was framed if you can offer no one who actually did it? But there you go. So the main issue of the conspiracy is finding alternative culprits, because there's no point saying Benoit was innocent if you can't find any potential candidates to people that would suggest otherwise, like I just said. However, conspiracy theories tend to point the finger at one man, a former WWF wrestler named Kevin Sullivan. When it comes to a setup, Sullivan, he does kind of fit the bill, but yeah, we'll see. He has a motive, an alleged mean streak, and also means in which to carry out the cover-up. First of all, Chris Benoit was not Nancy's first husband. Her first husband was none other than the man in question, Kevin Sullivan. However, Kevin Sullivan was interviewed in 2019 and said the following: "The best match I had in my life was with Chris. The Falls Count Anywhere in Baltimore, he was so intense. I have no ill will to Chris because me and her," that's Nancy, "were only together for 8 months. Still, nobody knows what really happened, and those 3 people are gone. I know Nancy's mother very well, and I don't think she's had a good night's sleep since. Sullivan continues the interview by saying that Benoit deserved every wrestling accolade he received. He worked hard and was one of the most intense individuals he had ever seen in the WWE. It's also worth mentioning that the man who founded this theory of Sullivan being the culprit is a man named Johnny Lee Clary, who was a former wrestler turned Ku Klux Klan leader who wrestled in Arkansas in the 1980s. Clary also said that Sullivan was a Satanist and he committed the crimes partly because of his beliefs. However, an article by WrestlePundit.com says, and I quote, "This so-called devil worship was never mentioned by Nancy's family, Benoit, or his family, any other wrestlers that are part of Sullivan's stable or worked with the couple, and neither Sullivan nor Nancy themselves have ever even hinted that they practice Satanism or any other obscure beliefs. In fact, the only person that seems to believe Clary's claims that Sullivan is a Satanist is Clary himself." So I'm going out on a limb here and saying Kevin Sullivan's completely innocent. He's been a victim of a very harsh and dangerous conspiracy theory, and I hate to think what goes through his head every time someone mentions it. It must be awful for him. But another counter-argument, the toxicology report, which we previously mentioned, also included information about Daniel Benoit, Chris's son. It was found that Daniel Benoit had Xanax in his system as well, which should have almost certainly been administered by Chris. This is used as evidence to show that Benoit sedated his son before he, making it harder to believe the story is an undiscovered conspiracy being involved. This also makes the possibility that Chris drugged his wife more likely, again undermining the possibility of a conspiracy. So here's our last closing argument. We've got a few, we've got a few references, not as many as we had last week, but as always, I will put them in the comments. I'll put them in the comments on the YouTube video so you can check them out for yourself. There is some very interesting stuff in there, so I recommend that you follow up a few of the articles. They're good reads. But closing argument. First of all, there seems to be a lot of coincidences involved in these cases. Greenberg coincidentally guessed that Nancy had died on the exact day she did, while coincidentally having alleged connections with Chavo, who was also coincidentally one of Chris Benoit's best friends. Greenberg was also never asked if he had any relatives or friends that worked for the WWE, which could have allowed him to obtain that information. He was never asked to name any of the posts or discussion boards that he obtained the rumours of Nancy's death from. A quote from the YouTube channel WrestleMania says, and I quote, "The cops in WWE's home city seem to have barely lifted a finger to find out the answers of any of these questions." WWE also has a record of spinning court cases in their favour, including manipulative lawsuits following the death of Owen Hart, the firing of Alberto Del Rio, the denial of company-provided health insurance, and the acquittal of Jimmy Superfly Snuka after he was allegedly accused of killing his girlfriend Nancy Argentino in the 1980s. So, I mean, my personal conclusion from this is Benoit was guilty. The thing is, the thing people don't want to... The reason this conspiracy exists is because people find it so hard to believe that a man as talented and, on the surface, so good-willed as Chris Benoit could have done anything as horrific and barbaric as this. They just cannot get their head around it. They just can't figure out how such a person could do such an awful thing. And I think that's where the conspiracy comes from. People just not really being able to accept the truth of the matter. And again, my sympathy goes to Kevin Sullivan in this. He did not ask for any of this. He's absolutely, as far as I can tell, he had absolutely nothing to do with it. And I do feel really sorry for him. But I feel like this conspiracy came from people wanting Benoit to be innocent rather than believing Chris Benoit was innocent. But I feel like WWE didn't get a hard enough whack across the back of the hand for this. They basically just got a slap on the wrist. They didn't even get that. No one gave WWE any real grief over this. But if you look into it, if they were doing proper neurological tests and they were doing proper blood tests to check for steroids, this potentially would never have happened. So WWE, I feel like, really need to take more responsibility for this. Instead of just going, oh, well, we'll just never mention Benoit again, sweep it under the rug and forget about it. It is really sad, of course, but it was Benoit. I don't think you can deny the man's guilty as sin. I don't believe he was innocent, but that's just my personal beliefs anyway. But yeah, WWE should be held a lot more accountable for this, but obviously not as accountable as the man who did it, that being Chris Benoit. But yeah, that's the end of the show today, ladies and gentlemen. We got through that one quite quickly. You've noticed that the shows this season have been a bit shorter. That's not intentional. It's just I've got a lot going on this year. Like, I'm station manager now. That takes up a lot of my time. I'm doing a master's degree this year as well, which also takes up even more of my time. And then I run the review page on Facebook. I've got my other radio show, AC Rock Reviews. I've got a lot of stuff going on for me at the moment. And trying to fit this writing in is really difficult. So I try and make the notes as long and detailed as possible, but then you'll get episodes like today where it is a bit shorter. But it will happen. I'm hoping as of next week, we're really going to crack on and get some more detailed notes and some longer episodes, which will give you a lot more to sink your teeth into, which is what this show is all about. I really want stuff like that to be the predominant feature of these shows. But yeah, that is the end of the episode today. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Also, hello to our new listeners. I know you're out there. I've seen you on Facebook. I hope that you're not just one-off viewers and you'll be back again for future episodes. We have next week, we've got some more spacey conspiracies for you. One of them is concerning Mars. The other one we've not really decided on yet, but me and Abby are going to be working on the notes throughout the week. Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this season. Last season was, this is season 2. Season 1 was a bit, it was a bit of a crash course sometimes because it's sort of, the conception of Conspiracy Crunch was a bit spontaneous. I've wanted to do a conspiracy show for a really long time. And then one day I was like, oh, I'll just do it. I'll just do one. Let's go for it. And then I brought Abby in, and that's how it happened, really. So a lot of the episodes we did, a lot of the subjects are very sort of, very mainstream, very down the line, very crash coursey. This year we're not being as safe, I would say. Thank you for tuning in, basically. That's the end of the show. I really hope you enjoyed it today. Once again, hello to the new listeners. Hello to our consistent listeners. And also hello YouTube when you're listening to this in the future. Or the present, as it will be by the time we get there. Time paradoxes, don't get me started. It's all, oh God, mind bend. Anyway, I'm Aaron Chandler. This is the Conspiracy Crunch. You have been listening on Radio HUD or YouTube. Either way, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday from 3 p.m. till 4 p.m. for 2. That is 2 brand new conspiracies we're going to have for you next week. I will see you then. Bye-bye for now.